Hello everyone and welcome back to Backlog Banter. My name is Tucker Hazell and this is Dev Dive, where I get a chance to talk to interesting devs about their games. And today I am joined for the first time by not one but two game developers, and this is Sienna Blumstengel and Gedig. We are here to talk about their game Peglin, which has been very popular as of the recent times, and we're going to get into the history of the game and why they made it and how they developed it and the work that each of them did. But I do want to start off, because this is my first time talking to two people at once. I want you to introduce each of yourselves and talk a little bit about what your role on the game is.
I'm Sienna. I'm the lead artist on Peglin, and I got into video games with Peglin. We started it at a game jam in 2019, and that was my first time opening a Sprite. And so you can see in the game that some art, lower quality than my stuff that I'm putting out now. But yeah, you can see my art journey through there. And everything that I've done on Peglin has been a learning journey, and that's pretty much what I'm doing as lead artist, is learning.
Helps out with a lot of the marketing and community stuff as well.
That's true.
I'm really thankful for.
That's true. Yeah, it is a small team, so I help out where I can.
Yeah, I'm Dylan, just kind of the project lead, I guess. Wear very many hats. Kind of started as a solo project for a few hours before I convinced Sienna to come and help me replace some of the art in the game jam we were doing, and then just continued on from there with the two of us for a while. And then we added a few of our friends to bring the team up to 4 to get the game into early access. And now we're a team of 6, which is kind of fun. So a little bit of growth there, both professionally and from a company side. And we're just still continuing to pluck away at it. We've got a couple more big updates before we'll kind of start to put it to rest and start working on something else. But for now, we're kind of supporting it almost like a live service game, which has been a really neat opportunity. It's been working pretty well for us.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff in there that I want to get into deeper later in the conversation, but I do want to start with the fact that this was started at a game jam. You said 2019, so we've got 5 years as the timeline from start to today, where the game is at now. But Sienna, I want to ask you, because you said you'd never worked on a game before Peglin, but you started working on it at a game jam. So what inspired you, as someone who'd never made a game before, to go to a game jam?
Yeah, Dylan brought me along to many a game jam before this one. I don't know how many we had done before. If you look at Dylan's itch.io, you can probably see how many. I probably should count. Yeah, and I think each game jam that we went to, I opened up a new art software. So I think I started with Blender, and I did Blender for quite a few. Then I got into like 2D vector art with Adobe. I had a student account. That was good. I milked that. And then I didn't attempt pixel art until that last game jam. And that was the last one that we did before we started working on Peglin on the side of our desks, and partially because COVID, so we didn't do any other game jams. But yeah, I just came to learn, and it was all of our friends hanging out, and they were all either in games or had done game jams before. I actually knew a friend who didn't do any digital art, but she was there. I knew her outside of my circle of friends with Dylan, and she just came and did like pen and paper stuff and scanned it and put that into a game. And that gave me kind of the impression that everybody's just here to learn and do whatever they can with the knowledge that they have. And that it was really fun.
So, Dylan, it sounds like game jams are more your thing that you then thrust upon Sienna. But what is it about game jams that it has excited you so much, and how long have you been going to them?
Oh, yeah, I've been at them for a while. I used to help organize the ones in Victoria, probably starting around 2015 or so, 2014, 2015. And then I would also help organize the Global Game Jam for several years. I ended up on the executive committee for a couple of years just to help coordinate the global effort, which had its fair share of challenges, but was also very, very rewarding. And then just from a personal side, I just love the no stress, just dedicating yourself to just booting up some software and just seeing what you can create in a limited time frame. And sometimes you just don't end up with anything that can even be published. You run into technical issues, or just the design doesn't come together, and it's just no harm, no foul. You don't have to sweat about it or be worried about setting yourself back from a main commercial project. And I think you just get some really interesting stuff out of that. I think a lot of the big indie hits that we've seen in recent years, if they didn't come from a specific game jam, I think they came from a very similar kind of prototyping element. I remember hearing a thing where the Balatro dev, like, the folder is still just in his like experiments folder. He just never expected it to take off. And I know that's, been the case for a couple of these other roguelikes that kind of exploded recently too.
Yeah, so the game starting at a game jam means that you were there to just kind of screw around and figure out what you could do. And with the idea of Peglin being a pachinko style game and having roguelike elements, which elements of the game that we know today were there from the very beginning? And do you remember, whichever one of you kind of thought about it at first, where the ideas for these elements of the game actually came from? Like, do you remember that first spark moment?
Yeah, I mean, I went into the game jam wanting to do just something physicsy. I wasn't too picky about what it was. And so the theme of the jam ended up being fall. It was in the autumn. So
Oh,
they were
okay.
kind of looking for seasonal. But I was like, it makes sense for our physics based idea. And so, yeah, at that point, I was kind of looking at like, Angry Birds. And then when the pachinko idea kind of hit, like Brick Breaker, Peggle, obviously. But by the end of the jam, we'd created just like one simple battle. So a lot of the pieces of the core game were there. It actually wasn't a roguelike at the beginning. My original plan for it was to be more kind of puzzle quest inspired, be a bit more of an RPG. But then it just ended up with, the way that we wanted power-ups to work and orb collection. Roguelike was just a more natural fit for it.
And so, Sienna, as you said, you kind of came into the game a couple hours after its inception. Do you remember what was there when you first showed up? Like when you were first brought on to the project?
Yeah, I think Dylan and I were working on another project with some other people, and then he was like, I really want to explore this physics thing. So he went off and did that, and I finished up the assets for the other people, and I joined. And I'm just realizing now, Dylan, you said you wanted to do something physicsy, but you downloaded a pixel asset pack, and that's what we started with. And it was a really cute, like, dungeon with a cute little goblin. Not the goblin that we have today, a different one. If you look at our itch.io project, you can still see the original goblin. But what now we do regret doing pixel art for a physics game because it's challenging. But Dylan, what made you pick that particular asset pack that we used?
Yeah, I mean, I just had the asset pack already. I'd used it for another game jam prior to that to make a little mini golf style game called Goblin Golf. And so I was just kind of reusing a lot of the same tiles and characters and everything. Yeah, as Sienna mentioned, we have a few small regrets, just being that like the physics in our game are like, actually perfectly spherical, but the pixel art is obviously quite blocky. And so there's a little bit of fighting there between those two systems. And so it's not ideal, but obviously it's worked out okay. And I think the pixel art really has a lot of nostalgic charm that works for the game and kind of helps communicate like, hey, this game's going to be a little tougher than kind of other modern games that follow this like big dopamine puzzle element, because a lot of the people that have played Peglin at this point don't even really know what a roguelike is, or this is their kind of first exposure to the genre. And so having things like the permadeath are a little less expected, but if it looks like an older game, that's kind of one more point in our favor there. So yeah, it's been an interesting experience for sure.
Well, Sienna, I'm actually curious, the idea that you've had to sort of adapt pixel art to fit physics that are not necessarily designed for pixel art, has that impacted the way that you've drawn sprites at all? Like when you're thinking about the physics process and then trying to fit a pixel sprite to fit that, has that impacted the way that you've rounded corners or designed things in certain ways?
I think it has. I think it's always in the back of my mind when I make something, especially for the play area where the physics are happening. I know in the back of my head, oh, they're not going to like this. Like, I don't get too crazy with it because I know we already have a system in place for managing the physics with the shapes that I have right now. So, like, I know when we implemented the Leshy boss, I was really scared because of all the stuff that happens in the play area. Dylan and Matthew made something that looks great and works great, and the art turned out pretty good. And I don't know what it's really just like the colliders on some of the shapes. I don't know how they work, but it turned out really good.
Yeah. Well, I am curious about what games inspired this. There's obviously Peggle, which is an iconic game, a very more casual game, as you were mentioning, that sort of pachinko style, like let things fall the way they are, is its own appeal. But I'm thinking about this game and how it is taking inspiration, but still evolving and combining elements from other games. And I'm curious, which games, but pachinko or not, did you play before that inspired Peglin? And then what did you sort of either take from them or leave from them as things you could learn or change or wanted to keep the same? What fed into creating Peglin?
As you mentioned, Peggle was a big one for sure. And then Slay the Spire is kind of the granddaddy of a lot of these like modern deck builder roguelikes. And then we've also just taken a lot of inspiration from other deck builders. We've got games like Monster Train, I was playing a good amount of at the time, and any other kind of modern spin on them. And also just a lot of kind of love letter elements to JRPGs. That's kind of my favorite genre when I was growing up. So that's where that pixel art kind of style came from, like a Super Nintendo era JRPG. All the kind of media that you consume kind of becomes part of your repertoire. You kind of put things in that are nostalgic for you, and the other people can kind of come by and find elements that are nostalgic to them, which is a very fun part of the game creation process.
And Sienna, for you, with the art that you've done and learning to do pixel art by making this game, are there any games that you've historically liked that might, with pixel art, that might have informed the art style that you were going for, that you might have taken elements from?
I often talk about my history with like dressupgames.com and playing like little room decorators that were all pixel art. You can't find them anymore, and I don't know what happened to them, but I have a very soft spot in my heart for like an isometric room, and they're all little like nice little crisp, clean, tiny pixel art elements, and you decorate a room and then you take a screenshot and you go on about your day. And I did that for hours and hours and hours. And that style of art, Peglin is not isometric, but the pixel art and the color palette and the crisp, clean, small little sprites, that's definitely like my favorite style of pixel art. And I think that comes into Peglin a little bit, especially when we did the bestiary. I had so much fun making all the enemies isometric. It was so fun. That was my favorite part. When I was young, I wanted to get into pixel art, and I kind of gave up on that dream when I opened MS Paint and was like, wow, this is really hard. But then I came back, and yeah. So I'm really happy that Peglin, Dylan downloaded that asset pack, and we moved forward with a pixel art game, because we just as easily could be making another style, and I would be happy, but pixel art is definitely my favorite.
And I like the fact that you guys have worked in tandem on this game for so long, but approached very different aspects of the game. And I'm curious, in the process from the beginning to today, what is the process of actually implementing art? What's the order in which you create things? What's the conversation that you're having between design and art of, let's make this enemy, and then how is it going to work? Like, how do you balance that, and what's the order in which things sort of come about?
Yeah, we mostly design mechanics first. We kind of go from a design-driven. There's kind of three pillars that you can approach adding new content to a game. Is you can kind of go from like the lore or the style of it, or mechanically. Given my history and the way the game started and then later continued, there was like an 8-month period where I was working on the game solo, and so it was just a lot of like, placeholder art, throwing stuff over the fence. Here's how this fight already works and is finished. If there was like ideas that we had for flair or ways to dress it up, then we would kind of have that discussion. But for the most part, it was just kind of, here's this thing that's finished and we'll go out to players, replace the art whenever you have the time. It's been kind of the way that development has worked on Peglin for a long time. Now that we're all full time, that's kind of changing a little bit, and we're having, more discussions, especially as we get into the final act and we want to kind of break the structures that we've kind of set up a little bit more and be a bit more experimental and crazy feeling. Getting Sienna involved as the artist much, much earlier, having her kind of test out ideas before we even get to the implementation stage. So that we should have the art like much more integrated going forward, which is nice.
Yeah. But I mean, all of that I assume is just growing pains. It's a learning process. You've never made a game with a team of this size. You never like actually delivered on a project over this period of time, and there's a learning process of that. You got to go through the parts where you're like, actually that's not exactly how it should work, and then you sort of come to grips, and of course you'll be able to apply those learnings to future projects, and it helps you work together with a team. Sienna, from that process of mostly him designing things or the team designing things and then you being able to put art onto that, have you felt that is a very satisfying process, or are you looking forward to sort of being more involved from the design level with your art going forward?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I only really thought about it very recently because I was so used to just cranking things out as fast as I could on the side of my desk, on weekends and after my day job. And that felt like a different sense of satisfying. I really enjoyed it and I still really enjoy it. Like when the team comes up with a relic and the mechanics already set, the name's already set, and I can just like make a little 16 by 16 sprite of whatever I think or they think is good. Like sometimes, most of the time, I don't come up with the art idea because usually the pun drives the art decision, and so then we have a name and then I think of a relevant object, and that's so fun. But it's a completely different task of being involved early on. I think it first started when we did the Leshy boss, and Matthew and Dylan made up a design document, and it was much more collaborative. We already had the Leshy art from way long ago, so we already knew that was going to be the main enemy, but it was still like a much more collaborative process where I was contributing a little bit to the art ideas and I guess sort of influencing the mechanics of what art ideas I had. It felt strange in a good way, kind of a challenging way, I would say. Like I definitely don't know if I prefer either way. I'm really enjoying the challenge, especially for this fourth area, because I feel like a lot of it is put on me, and I would not consider myself like a concept artist by any means. That is a very challenging and unique skill set that I think I would like to improve, but it's not as simple as some people might think. And so as we're discussing ideas, I'm really having to like get creative with it in a different way than I usually have been. So I'm really enjoying it, and also enjoying having our musician Adam in that part as well. Like, because usually he comes in the very last, he looks at the whole vibe of everything, and then he develops something from there. But having him early on and having him include his ideas too has been really cool.
Yeah, so I like the fact that you guys have a team with such diverse skill set, and you're able to combine everything to deliver on things, but have your own silos. I think that's really interesting for the design process. But you mentioned the puns that inform basically the names of everything in the game, and I think that's one of the fun sort of personality elements of the games, is whenever you find something, you get to look at not only the description and the little thing that describes what the ability of it does and how much power it has, which okay, you get that in any game, but the Peglin element and the sort of what I feel is like the Red Nexus game's little signature touch on top is everything's got a funny little pun name, whether that's based on a ball or a circle or an orb. And Dylan, I guess this comes to you. What's the process of coming up with those puns like? Do you just sort of throw things at the wall, or do you look up like different kinds of balls and try to come up with ideas? Like, do you enjoy that sort of pun process? What's that all like?
Yeah, it can be a lot of fun for sure. A lot of thesaurus using and
Sure.
kind of chaining off of dictionaries. Like if I'm just not finding the right kind of words, and then like you saying, like every kind of like ball, orb, arc, any kind of thing that works in that theme. Thankfully, now we're at the point where kind of our orb budgets are kind of used up, so we're not going to be creating like as many orbs going forward. But I was definitely starting to feel the limits of like, oh, I remember I've gone down this chain before of trying to make this particular like thing work, and I just wasn't able to. It is certainly a lot of fun, and it's been fun too as the game, as the team has grown a little bit and the game's development has continued. Other people on the team have been more comfortable like making suggestions, and it's been a bit more collaborative to bounce ideas off of. And yeah, in the early days, it was just me at a computer at 2 a.m. going insane trying to name this thing, and so it's changed quite a bit since then, which is great.
Yeah, so I assume each of you have been involved in some way with naming something silly. Do you each have one that you might have come up with that you're super proud of, or just one that's sort of your favorite? Like, wow, we really came up with that, and that's super clever.
I'll start by saying I don't think I have had the confidence to name a single thing. Knowing Dylan as long as I have, knowing your pun skills, I can't even approach it. Like, so I have contributed not a single thing.
I mean, sometimes you just like propose something that becomes the seed for an idea, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I'm a little picky. I try to give people on the team a lot of agency in what they create, and especially for things like art and music, I'm normally fully hands off. But yeah, the writing is something that I've been quite particular on, and I kind of have final veto power over every like name and description in the game, just to ensure we're keeping things consistent, if nothing else. Yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head that I'm like particularly proud of. There's a bunch that like kill me a little bit inside. Like the puns are just so egregious, and I'm surprised that we've kind of gotten away with it. It's been fun, and it's been fun seeing people resonate with them as well. As I think early on, it just kind of started as a silly little, aside. It just this was a game for us and our friends, and just like I'm just gonna sneak some of these little jokes in there. But then seeing that kind of become part of the core identity of the game, and I think again going back to the difficulty of it and this kind of roguelike element, I think it takes the edge off a little bit when you get something that kind of makes you chuckle and has a little joke attached to it. It shows that the game is not trying to be the Dark Souls of pachinko games like some people have accused us. We are there to build a fun experience, and the puns are certainly a part of it.
Yeah. Do you have any puns that particularly have stuck out to you, Sienna?
Wish I was prepared to answer this question. None that stick out. Can I retroactively come back and put my favorite one in the comments?
Sure, absolutely. Why not? Everyone look in the comments for the Red Nexus Games YouTube account to comment something. But when we're talking about these items, of course, there are the puns, but there are lots of balls and there are lots of relics that affect the game, and you're choosing them and sort of building your set of orbs that you are progressing through with. And I imagine that process is interesting, of balancing things and making sure nothing is too overpowered and coming up with the different ideas. How is this going to interact with different elements? I've got two questions that are kind of going down one path. Do you have any items that are your favorites, any relics or any orbs? And are there any that you can remember that didn't quite work, that might have not made the final cut? Whether that's Sienna, you making the art for something that didn't end up making it in, or Dylan, you designing something that didn't quite work.
Yeah, I don't think there's too many that just have never made it in some capacity. We've had items that have done a complete 180 on what they were originally intended to do, where they just like were just super overpowered or underpowered or just didn't work in the context of what we were doing. Yeah, there hasn't been too many that we've just straight up cut.
Yeah. Any items that are your favorites or that didn't quite make the cut, Sienna?
I just love bad cheese. If I see bad cheese in the beginning, that's what I'm picking. I do know that there was like in our Trello that we use, especially in the early days when I was just cranking things out, there would be like a rough sketch for a relic, and I would go in and make the art excitedly. And then, maybe they never got in, or I know there are some that were sitting in that column for years and the art never got in the game. And so I am always like really excited when I see art that finally got in. I think one of them was the piggy bank that sat there for a couple of years.
It's there for a while, yeah.
I actually don't know if it's in yet. That salty snack. The
No,
fish on a
not yet.
stick. Oh, I'm just spoiling things.
It'll be in for the next.
Okay,
one.
great.
I could also bleep that. I could put a little black bar over her mouth and go beep.
no,
Don't
it's
spoil
okay.
it.
It's a little teaser.
Yeah, I really love the art. It was a really good fish on a stick. I was really excited about it. So
Good fish on
can't
a
wait
stick.
to see that in there. I don't know if I'll like it in terms of gameplay, but we'll see.
Yeah. Actually, that is interesting, Sienna, for you making the art and then playing the game. Is there anything that you've been excited about and then you played with it in the game? You're like, I don't even like this at all.
Yeah, I'm sure there are lots of things, like things that I made. Maybe that's a good example. Things that I made a long time ago and then get implemented much later when it's a better time to implement it. And then I look at the art and I'm like, well, I would do that so differently now. Thank goodness we're at the stage now where things are less crunched and I can go and spend my free time if I want to go and update something, make a couple tweaks. Yeah, but there's so many things to do that with that I haven't really started. And at a certain point, it's like, well, I don't know. I kind of like seeing my journey out there. Nothing is that hideous, I don't think.
From an outsider's perspective, I can let you know that I'm playing the game. I can't really tell. Maybe this is a compliment or an insult. I have no idea. I can't really tell which ones are the good ones and which ones are the bad ones in your mind. It all feels very coherent to an outside view. But I imagine, as the artist, of course, you remember these little things. You're like, I would have changed that. And, at a certain point, that's what art is. You got to just put it out there, even if it's not perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very dangerous game to try and go back and improve upon the earlier things, because you can just end up in an endless cycle. It's a little different for us because the game is already out. But yeah, I see a lot of younger devs just kind of, they'll do that just endlessly instead of releasing a game ever. And it's a tough trap to break, because once you've worked on something for like a year, your skills at the end of that year are radically different than at the beginning. But at some point you just kind of gotta put it out there and just, live with some of the earlier work. And then, yeah, like Sienna said, it's nice to see that evolution. And in an ideal kind of world, you'd see that over several games. But Peglin has kind of just become this behemoth for us that, we're hoping to kind of wrap up our major development on it early in the new year. But it's, if it's going to continue to pay the bills and keep growing, and it's got such a great community, then we'll see. It's probably going to be years before we're fully away from it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's something that I found really interesting when I found out about the game, which I have to admit wasn't until I saw the game show up in the indie world, for the Nintendo indie world that happened earlier this year. And then when I learned about the game and then I met a couple of you at PAX West earlier this year, I didn't realize that it had such a vibrant community around it. And as this being like your first big project, how has it been like watching a community sort of swell and grow and have pick favorites and all this stuff around it? You guys have a very active Discord as well on the Red Nexus Games Discord, which I'll link in the description. How has it been sort of watching a community grow over the years for this game?
Oh, it's been great. Yeah, it's we certainly couldn't be doing what we're doing without people playing the game. And then we don't have any kind of QA department or anything. We just have a few handpicked community members that play through each of our updates in a secret like internal beta. We have players that kind of do as much analysis, if not more, than I do. We'll see them play through 50 runs in a row of a character and list out where their deaths and everything. And for a small company that doesn't collect any metrics or analytics or anything, like that kind of just raw information can be very, very helpful. And that's something that, prior to this game, none of our indie projects had any traction at all. So it's been really nice kind of seeing that engagement with the community.
And Sienna, how has it been for you on the art side, having a community sort of grow around the art that you made?
Yeah, none of it feels real. Like I said, it's my first game, and I don't think I ever imagined being in this position where, my art is seen by so many people. I remember, I don't remember when we made the fan art channel, but the fact that there is one still blows my mind. And I love everything that I see in there. Absolutely everything. It's so surreal. Seeing the first person dress up as Peglin for Halloween.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they wore a green morph suit, and it was very haunted looking. Really,
yeah,
really
a little haunted.
Yeah, and the first tattoo,
oh,
still,
really?
Yeah.
First of how many?
I don't know. I've seen a couple.
Probably about a handful now. I've seen
Wow.
about 3, so I would imagine that there's a few more out there as well.
That's an interesting thing to throw to someone as they're graduating high school or college. Do you ever think you'll create something that someone will make as a tattoo on their body?
Yeah.
That's I don't know how I feel.
Well, I
about
remember
that.
the first time we showed Sienna that somebody had gotten a tattoo, she just kind of cringed or kind of grimaced because it was an older version of the art that she had since updated, and it's that was not made for somebody's body.
Yeah, as a perfectionist, if I want something on somebody's body for the rest of their lives, I want it to be the perfect version. It was still cute. I like the first version that I made. It was just slightly asymmetrical compared to what I would have wanted now. Thank you, person out there who got that tattoo.
What was the tattoo of?
It was just kind of the generic Peglin from the key art kind of there.
Okay.
It wasn't the sweaty version, but just the normal one. For anybody out there, if you're going to get a video game character tattooed on you, just reach out to the game company or the artist, especially an indie team, because I'm sure Sienna would have prepared a version.
Well, you pointed to the key art, and I'm curious for you, Sienna. How is it? Number one, did you do the key art for this game?
Yeah.
So how different is it as a process of making the art into pixel art or from pixel art into, I guess, vector graphics or whatever you drew that on?
Yeah, it's very different. Like I said before, I'm so thankful that this game is a pixel art game. It could have easily been anything. And I think maybe it's just practice using a certain tool, but I so much prefer pixel art just as a thing to do in the day versus vector, because it's so much less drawing. I feel I guess you can approach it in so many different ways. And I'm still learning all the different ways you can learn different art tools. But the way I have approached vector art is very, it's so much more mechanical and less paper to pen. intuitive to me. And so it's kind of a chore to do the pixel art things or the vector things. But they are crisp and clean and cute, and it's harder and takes longer. That's probably just me not being super familiar with the tool as much as I am. It's very different, and I feel less confident in my abilities.
Back to the community just for a little bit. I'm curious for you, Dylan, on the more design side. How has community feedback impacted the post-launch support specifically over the years? I assume the community finds strategies and builds that are super strong, and then how do you go about like communicating with them to balance things so on the design level they're fair, but still keep the community engaged and having things that they really like? What's that process been like? Talking to the community and evolving the game over post-launch support for so many years.
For the most part, it's just incredible. Like the fact that we can put things out, and in a game like ours, we have something like we're closing in on 200 relics. We'll definitely pass that before we cease development. And I don't know how many orbs there are off the top of my head, but I think it's around like 80 or 90 different orbs. And so if you look at just like the possible permutations of things, like there's just no possible way that a single person could test everything in a lifetime. So having, a couple tens of thousands of active players out there playing and providing feedback is very, very important. And, there are things that we just overlook that just there's so many different combinations and different scenarios that it's just something that we kind of miss. And so having those reports, and then obviously we go in and fix up whatever we can. It's frustrating sometimes. I'll say like a small but vocal portion of our community thinks that like nothing should ever be nerfed because it's a single player game. They would much prefer that we just buff all the other 400 pieces of content to match. So that can be a little tough sometimes, where it's like we know we have to do this for the long-term health of the game, and none of the backlash has ever been too severe. I think it just leads to a little bit of grumpiness when people take something that used to be an automatic win, which is obviously something that we want to avoid. We have no problem if like 3 or 4 pieces of content together kind of form to make an automatic win. That's just the core of a good build at that point. But there should never be just like one piece of content that you always take every time you see it, because it doesn't need any synergies. It just stands alone and carries everything. And we have accidentally released content like that, and so that's just something that we learn to avoid. But having that community feedback to help us identify those points has been really, really good.
I'm curious on a larger level for the sort of pacing of the game. How did you design layouts for the pegboards? And then how did you decide which order to sort of place them in, which areas to place them in, and like which ones are easier, which ones are more difficult? Was there any, on the art side, Sienna, was there any influence that you had in terms of layouts of the pegboards, or was that more of a design thing? Talk about that process of implementing pegboards and then pacing the game so it gradually gets more difficult as you progress.
Yeah, it's been a little tricky for sure, just because, the pegboard design was a skill that I had never even really thought of before we started developing this. And so we kind of developed the game, forest, castle, mines as you encounter them. And so our pegboard design skills were kind of improving as we got into the later aspects of the game. So we did have to come back to the forest and overhaul quite a few of those. But you can still see that, we weren't really sure what the game was or how the physics would work at that point. And so some of the oldest ones that are still in the game still kind of have that feeling, but because the fights are early enough, we can kind of get away with it. The fights are early and easy. Certain types of enemies really influence the pegboard design. We kind of look at, slimes will kind of have rounder effects. Bricks will kind of always come in squares. Mirrors have special effects where they actually like mirror the pegboard. So it's a lot of looking at the different elements that you're trying to get across and then just coming up with something. And, sometimes it's very difficult to look at a blank canvas, and sometimes you just copy over an earlier pegboard and then just start moving pieces around. It's been one of the more difficult parts of the game for sure. And especially because we didn't expect the game to really become this big. We never wrote any like helpful software to make designing them easier. And so it's just like manually placing things in Unity. So you'll notice on especially like the long pegs that they're not actually symmetrical, because it's just we don't have the system to get those in place. It kind of drives me nuts from like an OCD standpoint a little bit. But you do the best you can with what you're given. And for Peglin 2, we'll work on improving our tools a little bit.
Sure. And I am curious for like just a larger scale sort of balancing of the game. Did you have a goal in mind for thinking of how long it would take someone to finish a complete run of Peglin? From my count, playing through the game a number of times and also putting my friends on it for I gave it to two of my friends and watched them play a couple times. It takes about 90 minutes to finish a round. And so was that like a goal of like, okay, an hour and a half feels like substantial, or did that sort of just evolve over time, or did you have to like balance it to get it to that sweet spot where it feels just long enough but not too long?
Yeah, it's one of the more interesting kind of back and forths that we have with our community is there's a lot of people that want the runs to be longer. For me, like 60 minutes would be an ideal one. Like if I could like on my lunch break, sit down and play through a game of Peglin on 2x speed and finish it, I'd be happy with that. So yeah, 90 minutes is kind of on the longer side. We're kind of like baby's first roguelike in a lot of ways. And I'd say a successful run on Slay the Spire for me takes about 90 minutes. So anything like below that, I think matches the vibe of the game a little bit more. Yeah, we have a lot of people asking for, like an endless mode after. And I'm not convinced that that's something that people actually want. I get why the request is there, but like when I play a game like Balatro with an endless mode, ending every single run on a loss, even if I've gotten the win, I don't think it actually feels as good as people want. But I can also see, wanting to put your build into the test flight and kind of see how it does. Run duration is something that we kind of have different ideas on than a lot of our community. And in the ideal world, we'd have easier modding and let people kind of design different things. But we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, yeah. This being a game that can be quite addictive. I put both my friends on it and they finished their runs and then did one more because like, okay, I just gotta, now that I know what I can try to do next time. But for both of you in roguelikes, in puzzle games, what to you makes a good just one more round type of game? And I do think Peglin really does nail that, as I can attest to and my friends can attest to. But in your experience as game players and then also as designers, what makes a game addictive? What makes it like, I would just want to go on that one more time?
Yeah, specifically on that one more run, I think a big important thing is, when you lose, you'd want to know why. If you just kind of mysteriously die, and Peglin has a few issues with this. There's still a few enemies that are a bit sneaky or meaner than they should be, or just less transparent than they should be. It's not really clear how they're damaging you. A lot of people complain about the sheer amount of randomness in Peglin, but I think that's a huge thing for replayability. The fact that like I can still sit down and play a round of the game and I still run into things that are just completely unlike anything I've experienced after 5 years of working on this thing. That really just, makes it juicy to just kind of come back and start again. And yeah, it's just neat, seeing what options you're offered and how a build might come together. Yeah, that's replayability is one of the key things that worked well for Peglin.
Yeah. Sienna, do you have anything that makes a game sort of addictive to you?
I've actually yet of the roguelikes that I've played since getting more into the genre after making Peglin, I can't think of a single one that I haven't felt like, oh, I gotta play one more. Maybe I've just found my genre. Love a roguelike. Can't stop.
Do you have any ones that are personal favorites of yours?
I really love Dungeon Crawler right now. Oh my gosh, everybody go play Dungeon Crawler. They just came out in their 1.0. So good. So juicy. And I literally find myself, my whole body is clenching like you do when you play a claw game. It's exhausting playing a full run of this game. And then I just found Solitude on itch. It's a Pico 8 game and it's a solitaire roguelike. And I literally can't stop playing, mostly because I'm really bad at it and I haven't won a single run. Like I haven't even gotten past the first area, but I can't stop. It's so fun.
I've got two more questions for the both of you. First off, I want to ask about how the Red Nexus team has grown and changed over the years. As the game has grown in popularity, as you've had to support it through post-launch support, you've, of course, added a couple more members to your team. But when is it that you sort of decide, okay, we need someone else? How do they come on board, and are you happy with your team size? Do you think you could grow a little bit more for future projects? What's that sort of growth like?
Yeah, it's, we're pretty happy with the numbers where they are. It's always nice to have a bit more help when you can, but we were a little bigger in the past and found that, the organizational needs become a bit much. And I think your company growth almost has to just turn exponential at a certain point where, you start having to hire managers. And then at a certain point, it's managers for the managers. And you kind of get stuck in all this bureaucracy. So we're trying to kind of stay as slim as possible and operate a bit more like a band than a traditional company. Kind of helps keep the creativity and lets everyone kind of contribute, even if it means that we all kind of have to wear a couple of different hats to keep things going. The smaller you are, the riskier you can be. And I think in indie games, that's just so crucial. Like you're seeing a lot of these big indie games kind of pop off where it's like, mostly one person. And that's because they were able to just kind of be experimental and then see where things went. And, there's no pressure to try and feed 8 families. I think when you get to that point, there's a reason why almost every Call of Duty game looks very, very similar, because they're trying to feed 500 families. Like I totally get where they're coming from. They can only be so experimental before they alienate the player base that they've built up. And I think for indies, that's just not where our specialties lie. So yeah, we're trying to stay small, stay lean, and we do want to make a Peglin 2 at some point, but in between that, we want to just kind of experiment and throw a few more things at the wall, like we did with helping May release Foul Damage. And yeah, it's you get more flexibility if you can keep your runway long.
Yeah. And Sienna, what has been like on your end, sort of watching the team grow over the last few years?
It's been really, really cool, really special. I guess it just kind of goes with the whole magical surrealness of the game doing well and having new people join the team and having their perspectives, contribute in different ways, and having our co-op students or like interns through the local university has been really cool. Like that felt like a really big milestone, being like so official that we could have a co-op student, and they're so great. Like
you're recognized by a university.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how hard it is to be recognized, but like really, 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 really cool having them on the team. I know it's been challenging for Dylan. Like he's doing all of the admin stuff, and trying to design a game, develop a game, doing all these other things. I don't know how you have time. So like for me, it's not, I don't think of it from the same perspective as you do. I'm like, oh my gosh, yay, more fun friends. So
yeah. And the final thing that I'm curious about is something that I sort of offhandedly mentioned earlier, which is that your game showed up in a Nintendo Direct, which was an indie world that happened a couple months ago, just before the game was coming out on Switch. And I'm just absolutely ridiculously curious about what that process is like. Like, how did you get your game in Nintendo Direct? Who did you reach out to? Who did you contact? How long was that in the process for? And then, of course, filming it and it showing up. Just as much details as you, I guess, are allowed to share or want to share of how your game got into Nintendo Direct. Give me all the juicy details.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, that sort of thing is covered pretty heavily by their NDAs.
Okay, fair enough.
I can say, to the developers out there, this is something you're just going to want to talk to your Nintendo rep about. Or in our case, we did have a relationship with our Nintendo rep, but ended up working with a third-party company, a console publisher, Blitworks, to just kind of handle the simultaneous porting and publishing, just because we had already self-published Peglin on PC and mobile. And we're under active development of the game, and we push out an update at least once a month, and we pretty much lose an entire day just to the technical side of putting the updates out on all platforms and then writing up the patch notes and porting them across. And it was just getting too much, and then trying to add like active development of 3 more platforms to that was just too daunting. So Blitworks has been great to work with. They kind of worked out that deal. But I can say that, having that indie world was one of the most surreal elements of Peglin, second only to launch day and seeing the numbers kind of shoot through the roof and shock us and that life-changing moment. We filmed the direct when we were in Tokyo on our way to Bit Summit. And then the direct aired when I was sitting in a hotel room in Frankfurt, fresh off the heels of Gamescom. So it was just, so strange. I was still a little jet lagged and exhausted from the convention. And it was I want to say 8 p.m. Frankfurt time or something. I had just come back from dinner, and then this thing was blowing up. And I had people messaging me that I hadn't spoken to in 14, 15 years, like old friends from high school being like, just saw you on Nintendo. Like, oh my God. Watching the comments and watching all the chat like go live, and the people that were just discovering the game for the first time, and the people that had been longtime Peglin players that were excited that it was available. It was just a crazy, crazy moment. So yeah, that was one of the highlights of having Peglin out in the world for sure. Yeah, really, really exciting day.
Yeah. Sienna, what was that like for you, being at Nintendo Direct?
Yeah, about the same. I wasn't in the Frankfurt airport. I was at home right here. It was in the morning. And yeah, I always say, like, even after the first day we released early access, that was a really big day for us. And we've had so many other milestones since then. And I'm still always saying, like, it doesn't feel real. Like, this is literally a dream. Somebody's going to pinch me. I'm going to wake up. It hasn't set in. Like, I'm not having this euphoric feeling that I know I should be having with this amazing opportunity that we've had. But that, when I saw us on the Nintendo Direct, I was like, whoa. That was a really cool milestone. Something that I don't think I ever expected for myself. Didn't think I'd be in games. Didn't think that would happen.
Well, that brings me to the end of the list of questions that I have prepared for you. And of course, I'm very glad that you both joined me. If there's any final thoughts that you want to sort of share with the Peglin community, or any little details about the game, take the opportunity. But otherwise, we're wrapping up.
Yeah, no, I wish we had something a bit more immediate to tease, but we're just heads down working on the kind of Act 4 bonus update. So it's just going to be, an optional act that you can tackle after taking down the 3 core bosses. That lets you kind of challenge your build a little bit more. We'll see if it scratches the itch of, people asking for endless mode. And we're aiming to have that out sometime early in 2025. It's going to be one of the bigger updates we've done since the game went 1.0. And yeah, we're looking forward to sharing it with everybody.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts, Sienna?
It's going to look pretty cool. I'm excited about this 4th area.
So am I, and I hope everyone watching this, whether you're from the Peglin community or not, are also looking forward to this. I will have the link to buy the game down in the Steam description, and just for shits and giggles, I'll also include Foul Damage down there because I love that game. And I hope you guys enjoyed listening to the story of our developers here, Sienna Blumstengel and Dylan Gedig. And go play Peglin. It is a very good game, and I hope you guys stick around for more dev dives in the future. Thank you very much for joining me.